in our first year, we did a few $100,000 in like orders, which if you're a tech company and you did that in orders, you'd be really super successful, right? So
You're already being millionaire.
Yeah. So that was, we took orders in no time. I would say that it's quite funny. So as a female founder, even in fashion, if you're saying about like, can they be considered founders?
Well, hello. It's DeAndre here, and welcome to the Pioneers Show, the show where we talk with innovators, makers, entrepreneurs, basically people who are trailing their own trails and creating their own lives, so that we all can learn how to work on our own ways. This is episode 12, and I'm your host, Andre de Albuquerque. You can find me at It's DeAndre on Twitter and on Instagram, as well as the show at Pioneers Show on Instagram as well. In this week's episode, we have with us Sara Ahmadi, the CEO of a very interesting fashion tech startup, Shopist. Actually, I'll call it tech fashion. You'll figure it out along the conversation. We talk about Sara's traveling and experiences working in different countries, her former career as a fashion designer, and a lot of things about being a non-technical founder. I really had a great time talking with Sara, and I hope you have a chance to get to know her as well. So, without any further ado, let's welcome into the show, Sara Ahmadi. Hello, Sara. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And you?
It's a little bit hot here in Berlin. All good. Thank you
Sara,
very much.
by the way. Sara.
Sara, sorry.
No, you're okay.
But Sarah would be with an H in the end, right?
My dad's family are from Iran, so it's definitely Sara.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry
It's
for
the
that.
pronunciation. No
Sara.
worries.
That's actually the way you say it in Portugal. Sara.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think it's the way people say it in practically all of the world, apart from the US and UK.
Probably, yeah. And then almost everybody hears those names from the US and the UK. So it's Sarah, but it's Sara.
Yeah.
Okay, Sara, thank you very much for being here on the Pioneers Show. It's a lovely pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
So for people back at home who don't know who you are, care to give us a 3-minute pitch about yourself?
A 3-minute pitch.
3-minute pitch.
My background, or
Sure.
where do you want me to
Talk
start?
about yourself. Let's.
Yeah, so I was born in Manchester, England. I stayed there until I was 18, and then I moved to London. I moved to London to go to Central St. Martin's to study fashion design with knitwear. I did that I was there for 4 years. And then I moved to the States, came as a designer, came back to London, worked in London for a while. Then I moved to Abu Dhabi temporarily. Then I moved to San Diego. Then I moved to Boston. Then I moved back to New York, where I stayed for a while. Then to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, to Phoenix, and then I came back to London.
So you clearly traveled a lot.
Yes, I would say I've traveled a lot. I've lived in some very hot places and some very cold places.
What would be the coldest places you've ever lived? Probably Boston.
Yeah, I mean, like when I lived in Boston, it started snowing in November. There was a blizzard just after Thanksgiving. And outside the apartment I was living, somebody put their bike on the railings, and they didn't get their bike again until May. So the blizzard just completely went. The way they plow the snow, there's probably, trying to think in metrics, probably a 2.5 meter snow wall. So when I was walking to work, yeah, it was gross, black, sludgy, cigarette butts, It was what it was.
Well, to be honest, I only saw snow when I came here to Berlin in January. So I can say that I've been privileged enough that I'd never had to encounter that cold.
Yeah, we don't get much snow in England. It's kind of sludge.
Really? It's more of a rainy...
It just doesn't settle. Not in London or Manchester. It just kind of, it comes, you might get a couple of inches, and that's it.
Yeah, in Portugal you have none of that. Probably in the high mountains, but you don't see any of that. Okay, so you moved around a lot, and this is actually something that I wanted to eventually touch now in the line, but since we have it here, you've encountered a lot of different, let's say, cultures.
Yeah.
The US is quite big, but you've also been in England, different parts of England, Dubai. And this is actually something that I think my girlfriend would kill me if I didn't ask. As a woman, and you were doing fashion design in all these areas?
No, actually. So in New York, I'm the majority of the time before I thought of going into tech and being a founder, I was a designer. So in New York, primarily design. In London, a lot of the time design. When I was working in the UAE, I was working in marketing. So I worked for a marketing company that worked with like Abu Dhabi in Islamic Bank and NatWest and a lot of different institutions. So I was primarily marketing there.
Okay.
I also worked in like a wearable tech show. I worked with the Dubai Design District, but it was all about like marketing and events rather than actual anything to do directly with fashion.
So how was it? Okay, then before going on around the world part, how was the transition from the design part of fashion, but very design, very creative focused, probably to a more analytical, I assume? Or you were used to still very working on a creative part?
I was still more on the communications and creative part. I wasn't really on the research or, you know, heavily into the strategy. It was definitely different, but you find that in design anyway, that, you know, unless you're doing like a avant-garde collection, a lot of it's to do with research as it is. Because you have to know who you're designing for, what sells very well. It's parts of design that people don't really understand or appreciate, that you don't design just what you want to design. You rarely do that if you're designing for a company. You have to design on what sells in previous season, who your customer is, their price points, the fabrics that they like. So there is a ton of research that goes into design that isn't seen. You only really see these pretty sketches that designers don't do anyway.
They don't?
They don't. You rarely do fashion illustrations. You know, if you do a fashion illustration, it will be for yourself, right?
Oh, really?
Or you'll use it for marketing purposes. You do flats and like tech packs. I mean, if you send an illustration to a factory, you'll get something completely different back. And it's quite precise. You have to know, for example, the T-shirt you're wearing right now, you know, the measurements, the type of stitch, you know, the weight and everything else. It's quite specific. So that is really what design's about. Most of it's actually done on computer programs anyway.
So basically, am I correct to assume that most of fashion designing, it's actually almost of an engineering thing, engineering the exact building, creating of clothes or accessories?
Yeah, and you work in quite big teams a lot of the time. But there are huge, you know, like specifications that you have to get it to be designed. And because most product is actually produced overseas, it has to be quite precise or you'll get something completely different back. You rarely get the opportunity to sit there in the factory to make sure a sample's made the way you want it to be made.
So, and let's assume once again, where were the main factories, for example, when you were working in New York?
Actually, I did a lot of them in Hong Kong.
So in Hong Kong, I assume, is it imperial or is it metric?
It's both.
So whatever you send to there, in theory, you'll get whatever you have. Because I assume that if you work with a factory that does not work with imperial or vice versa, does not work with metric.
They're used to working with American companies and it's imperial. So they are used to inches, they're used to yards, they're used to how Americans work, and they will convert it mostly on their side.
Okay. Because that's something that I know a few things from the Fahrenheit. I think it's 34. It's 0 Celsius. I know a few things, but the imperial system, it's very hard for me to grasp.
Well, a good cheat method, it's not 100% precise, but you double the Celsius and add 30.
Double.
So it's 15, you double it, it's 30, add 30. Well, 32. And it's roughly what the conversion is.
Okay, and the feet and inches, do you have any kind of cheat sheet for that as well?
Not so much. Because the strange thing, because England is a hybrid. So
really?
So when it comes to, if you go to the doctors, for example, it is kilos, centimeters, and everything else, right? But you measure, we still do pounds and ounces when it comes to fruits and vegetables.
Oh.
It's on a market stall. In the supermarket, it is metric with the EU and all when we were in the EU. But it's miles. So we have a hybrid system.
That's
so we still
weird.
have miles.
So you have, but you're an advantage because you then have to learn everything. At one point, you know everything. You're not confused.
Well, if you go to the gym, it's in kilos, right? And then you're like exercising, it's usually in kilometers. Like, it is It's like a mixture, whereas in the States everything is still, it's pounds and
Pounds, ounces, miles, yards,
inches.
inches, and feet as well.
Yeah.
The only measurement that I know in feet, it's 6 feet. It's 1 meter and 82.
Okay, I don't even know that.
I just know that because when I got to 1 meter and 82, I knew that I was 6 inches. I'm like, okay, no, 6 feet. I know this. Now I know.
Yeah,
Then I
that's
got
pretty
bigger and I don't know. I think it's 6'1" something. Okay.
Yeah.
So going again for your worldwide view of everything.
And being a female founder.
But right now, being a female founder, you said that was after New York, in New York, and
No, I mean I had my own label as well when I was in New York.
Oh.
And I may. This is a really embarrassing thing to say because I am very much a Democrat. We used to sell a lot of dresses to Fox News. We used to do custom dresses for all the TV presenters on Fox News.
that's a very right-leaning.
So we didn't actually advertise that so much, even though they're incredibly super popular presenters. But when we'd go to the trade show, and because our studio was on West 38th Street, so we were quite close to a lot of the studios, and we used to custom make things and have a certain style, and we sold predominantly workwear. But being in a creative industry and being a female founder was not a big deal, right? So a lot of people in design are women, and they have important roles, so it wasn't a big deal at all.
But when you went to tech, eventually that might have been a bigger
I
transition.
didn't really think about it to begin with. I didn't think of it. I've never really thought about it as a limitation until it actually came to having discussions with investors or different mentors and so forth. And the questions that you'd be asked were completely different, or the assumptions made, than they are to male founders, I remember one time I was sat next to this guy and we were talking about products or whatever. And he had this startup. This was in Phoenix actually. And it was this property tech thing. And he was showing it on the website and I had something and I was talking about it. And I remember one of the guys came up to me, he's like, "Oh, this is pretty. Who did this for you?" Right? And I was like, okay. And then the guy next to me, they didn't ask him any questions. And he was laughing his head off because he didn't know anything, right? He couldn't say anything or do anything, and he's like, "Do people talk to you like that all the time?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, they do, I think then you start noticing that
Different treatment, probably.
A lot of it's just patronizing, and it's not from just the male mentors. Women are probably sometimes worse, especially when they're investors. They don't want to be seen as giving favoritism.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Or they've got to a point where they feel like they're quite successful in a male world and they don't want to let anybody in. And I just think they're the worst people in the world. I mean, I think if you're conditioned subconsciously as a male to be a certain way, you almost can't help it. But if you know that you can't help other women or other minorities of any description, well, you could, but you choose not to because you want to secure your place. I just think they're the worst people ever because it's not a competition.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, just a side story. I remember when I was in Portugal, I met a female founder that had a fashion startup as well. And she told me once that when she was talking with one of the first investors, the investor said, "Oh, that's cute." Yeah. And she said that she felt it was patronizing, but in a way that is like, that's sad. And I cannot know how that feels because not only I'm not a founder, I'm not going to be raising money anytime soon, but at the same time, I wonder how does it feel to be okay? Let's put some things straight in terms of this conversation. I'm not a person that believes in politically correct usually, but I believe that some people have some difficulties in specific areas of the world, and when you get to the founder and you have to put your life or your work in the hands of others, I believe that there can be some kind of weird way of looking at stuff. And everything that I know from female founders to investors, it's always the same thing. It's patronizing, condescending sometimes. Sorry to interrupt you, unless you're like really ruthless and you don't even know because you're just, okay, you're saying shit, I don't care.
No, the people that, I mean, I remember I was at this female founders conference in San Francisco last year, and Eileen Lee, the head of, I'm pretty sure she's Eileen Lee, head of Cowboy Ventures, a really successful venture firm. And she was saying that women have to be killers, right? They have to be so much better at the numbers and everything else. Because if you sat in a room with other investors and they're going over the numbers or whatever, women aren't going to have like, I like that dude, right? They don't have that, when people say they invest in people like them, they're not going to have that, right? So they have to have something else and be way better. There's that adage that men go on promise and women go on proof. And I think really in like entrepreneurship, that is particularly true. You'll have a lot of guys who have a good idea and they say, oh, I can see myself in him. Whereas for women, there's definitely the perception that they need a lot more traction or they need a lot more proof points.
Why do you think that happens?
Because it's a male-dominated industry.
I believe that it's a numbers game eventually. I know that.
It will change, but it has to change by the women I was talking about before not seeing it as competition, right? So it has to be, there is not one point where I feel that a man, if he invests in another man, thinks, oh, right, I'm looking like it's favoritism, right? They're just investing. They've got to get over themselves too and realize that you invest in a good team, idea, product, whatever you may invest in, and just stand by it. I think when people are so bothered about securing their own place, it's a hindrance to everyone else. Then they end up being like Margaret Thatcher, who obviously I despise, but like, that kind of female. And I'm saying that because I've been in a lot of situations where I've heard things of women that I was at a conference last year actually, and there is apparently especially in the UK, women, only 1% of women look for outside funding.
Really?
Right? In the UK, 2.8% of VC funding goes to women. Now, there's a lot of contributing factors to them, which I'm sure I don't know a lot of them. But the fact is, part of it is women don't necessarily want to put themselves through that. If they know they're going to get a lot of pushbacks and it's an uncomfortable situation. And when it comes to networking, apparently women are fantastic on a personal level, but on a business level, not as good as men, right? There's a lot of reasons which go into it.
But that's also, I assume that's also a little bit of I won't say biology, but there's also different ways that our brains work.
I don't think it's a case of brains working, because then on a personal level, why would people be good at networking? Why would women be really good when it comes to PR and communications and different skills like that?
Because it's a matter of this is my own view.
I feel like it's a network thing, right? So it's very hard to infiltrate old boys clubs, isn't it? Right? Yeah. So if you're going into a room and you're female and practically everybody else is male, to really get into those circles when people are talking anyway, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Right? So
I would assume.
Yeah, no, it is difficult. It's difficult being the only female in lots of situations, and the only kind of metric that other people see is that people didn't give you shit, right? Or they weren't condescending to you. They don't seem to see that the conversation and the way it's structured is very much very much male orientated. So it's hard then to get up and say something and feel quite comfortable. But going back to the conference, I asked one of the female VCs, about the Northern Powerhouse in Manchester. It's this big initiative by the government to try and get more entrepreneurship outside of London. Okay. So they're apparently giving a lot of money to different VC firms to invest in companies outside of Manchester. So my question was if that's the case and you're kind of starting from zero, say, in Manchester, which is not, but I'm saying in theory, do you see that it would be a better playing field for female entrepreneurs? And her first answer was, well, we can't just invest in women just because they're women, right? And that just seemed like such a ridiculous response. It wasn't a case of investing in people just because they're female. It was a case of, do you think there'll be more investment to women because they haven't had the bias towards men because there's not that much to begin with. And that was it. And that's the sort of attitude you get from a lot of female VCs that I've met.
Yeah, we went on a big tangent here. Going back to your experience as a female founder, but you touched on one point that I was not expecting. Do people who have their own labels, can they be considered entrepreneurs at one point? What's the day-to-day to someone who has their own label?
Well, yeah. In our first year, we did a few $100,000 in like orders, which if you're a tech company and you did that in orders, you'd be really super successful, right? So
you're already being millionaire.
Yeah. So that was, we took orders in no time. I would say that it's quite funny. So as a female founder, even in fashion, if you're saying about like, can they be considered founders? I wonder about this when you talk about like, Casper mattresses,
yes,
for example. They are a tech company. For what reason they are considered a tech company, I do not know.
That's the e-commerce part, probably.
Probably, but they started off with one mattress. If you're a female founder and you sell clothes online, you are not a tech company. But if you are a lot of male founders and you sell mattresses online, you can be considered a tech-enabled company, right? It's kind of the way that there's like perceptions of the value of doing something. So we do like nearby location, nearby retail.
We'll go more into shops.
And I just mean because there's other companies that do it, and the way that they're perceived, not really as fashion platforms.
Okay.
They're really perceived as retail platforms.
And not necessarily tech.
Always tech.
Okay.
Tech first, retail. The fashion is right at the back of what they do. So even though we are solving the same problem with a very, I would say, similar solution, the way they're described is very much, tech, retail, and then fashion's right at the back. And the way we're always described is fashion first, tech right down at the bottom.
And why do you do that? Okay,
I don't do that. I'm saying that
that's the
way
perception.
other people perceive it.
Okay.
They focus on the fashion element first and only the fashion element, which doesn't bother me because we are about fashion retail. But we know I was talking about perceptions.
Yeah, you don't want to, once again, you want some, I won't say equality, but you want to have some idea that if this kind of thought, this train of thought is good for this one, this should be the same for this one according, if it's the same solution.
Yeah, so when you were talking about are people who have their own labels considered founders, it really depends on who is describing them. So I am sure that if we're looking at, I don't know, Tory Burch or any, particularly extremely successful labels, she's considered a founder. Or if you look at Sarah Blakely from Spanx, she's considered a founder. I would just use those two as examples of people who would be considered founders in a fashion realm.
So that's funny because when I think of artists and fashion designers, I think of them as founders, as artists. I don't know, and not only male or female. I think that when it's very artistic, very put your hand in the mud and create something out of thin air, I usually think of you as an artist and not necessarily as a founder.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that I think that the title of founder is a relatively new thing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And people try and use it, I guess, because entrepreneur is such a overused and horrid word nowadays that founder is, the replacement.
Yeah. You can be an entrepreneur, founder. In a few days, you'll be a blockchain entrepreneur. And then
yeah, maybe.
Okay, so going back to your label,
yeah,
and that's actually something that when you went to Abu Dhabi and started working in marketing, and how was the transition going from fashion design? We already touched a little bit on this, but I just want to see, did you study anything specific? Were you reading any books, anything specific when you did the transition to full-time marketing? Let's put it this way, in quotes. Did you read anything specific, or is it just common sense from your own experience as a label?
Well, when I was in London, I did a postgraduate postgraduate diploma in marketing
Okay.
for the Chartered Institute of Marketing. So
So you already had some bases and already.
yeah, so I already had some bases, but design and fashion is predominantly about marketing. It's not really about anything else. It's not about quality. It's not about style. It's about marketing. And you kind of learn that early on. It's about who wears your clothes, where they're seen. I would say the different things about having a label than, say, being a tech founder is if you want to show at certain shows, you have to show a worth to begin with. You have to show that my stuff is good enough or my designs are good enough that these particular
So it depends on who else is selling them or wearing them.
Yes, you need to have brand equity to begin with, right? Whereas I would say like non-design founders or whatever, or tech founders, they can build up to that. I would say that's one of the biggest differences, where it's the main thing with design, because they know that there's not very much that separates people. It's more about who's wearing the clothes and who champions you, like it is in art. It's like what galleries show you and so forth. Whereas with tech, it's different.
So transitioning now into tech, can you give me a little more information on what's Shopist?
Why it started, or
Everything. Give me an history lesson on Shopist.
Okay, so I was in New York, and I was living in Brooklyn. I just moved, so I was in Manhattan beforehand, and I worked like 10 blocks away from where I lived, so I knew the area pretty well.
Where were you? Sorry, Brooklyn.
Yeah, so I was in Ponce, Williamsburg, and I booked a vacation, and I really needed a swimsuit. And it was my whole problem of going on my smartphone, searching, and not finding what I wanted nearby. And it just didn't really make any sense, because I was so used to going on, like Beauty Booked, or for like a salon, or going on Open Table to book any old restaurant. And I was always on Yelp for happy hours. So I was so used to finding what I wanted to find that I was really surprised that when it comes to retail, you can't just find what you want to find. And Google Shopping, even now, is particularly terrible. You can find something if you know exactly what you want to find. There's no like inspiration or anything else. So I had that problem and started talking to retailers about it. But it was a while afterwards that really anything started to happen. So as I was saying, I was still working in design, and I was noticing in the garment district just the sheer number of sample sales and pop-ups. And if anyone's not familiar, especially in New York and London, you get a lot of sample sales. So usually it's 1 or 2 or 3 designers. It used to be, when there were actual sample sales, they'd be the samples that you would you'd have come back from the factories, and you'd have like whole collections of them. And you'd have to go to a warehouse or a special location and get them really cheap. Nowadays, sample sales are the way that the designers can actually sell the clothes themselves and get the profit for them, rather than sending them like to TK Maxx or somewhere else. Okay. So they're incredibly popular. I noticed that, like in the building that I was in, we had like Millie, loads of other designers in the building. They would just put a piece of paper on the elevator door and say, sample sale on the 16th floor for 2 days, like 80% off. It wasn't readily available to anyone. And I just thought it was a shame, like, that there was no connection for people to find these sample sales. They wanted to get rid of clothes and just find retail nearby. So as I was saying, I thought about it for a while. And then I was deciding, like, whether to actually do anything about it. Like, I was really kind of naive. So I had the idea. I went to see, I think it was Golden Seeds. I just like walked in and said, hey, I've got this idea.
Golden Seeds?
It's a VC fund,
okay.
For early stage VC fund in New York. Like literally just got office hours and just went in and said, yeah, I want to find like retail nearby and I need like $300,000 to do it. Like, clearly they said no. But the point is, I think I came from, because I was like, quite successful in design. I didn't see there was any barriers. I didn't know anything about anything like textiles or anything really. And I think not knowing any of that gave me the freedom to just go and ask a lot of questions. So in my studio in New York, do you know Appboy?
No.
Appboy is quite, if you look them up, they're quite a successful company. They were
Boy, like
App, A-P.
App PP Boy.
Yeah.
No, I never heard.
Yeah, so if you look at them, they do like a lot of the marketing for like, it's not marketing, it's a
Promotion, maybe?
no, it's a really powerful platform that people use for apps and different things like that for their for their analytics, for their push notifications, for their everything else. So they were in the office next door because in the garment district, a lot of tech companies came in because, you know, the huge warehouse space where there used to be, I don't know, 50 machines. Mm-hmm. They had more money. They're like venture money. They would come in, the factories would go, and tech companies would appear. Mm-hmm. So on our floor, there was a ton of studios and showrooms. And Appboy were next door. They started off with this small space, and then they just kept on acquiring more and more space. So I used to just like go next door and ask them like tons of questions, like this is what I want to do. And you know, like the founders mainly, they all went to not the main founder, but the co-founders. They all went to MIT and very tech orientated. And they're like, yeah, you just need to, you know, like tell me what I should do. Just like do an MVP, just do this and like see if it's viable and, you know, really think about it.
Were you accustomed to these nomenclatures already, the MVP? I assume so because you went to the VC and probably...
You know, I read Lean Startup.
By Eric Ries, right?
Yeah, so I just like listened to all those like things and, you know, it wasn't too complex. And then I thought I'm really interested in this. So I went to WeWork Labs.
It's in Brooklyn. The first one was in Brooklyn, right?
I went to the one at 222 Broadway.
That part of geography, I don't know, but I was just
It's
curious.
like opposite the World Trade Center.
Okay.
So I went to WeWork Labs, like literally not knowing a thing that I was going to do. And there were amazing companies like all around, like Thunderclap. They sat in front of me. Like Ruckus were behind. Tons and tons like... one of the guys, he was like on the front of Fortune, not the front of Fortune, he was like one of the 40 under 40, like just all on my desk, right? So I would say that was probably the best experience of wanting the change from fashion into this. Because I was like, this is kind of what I want to do. I have no idea
how to do it.
And they were just super helpful.
But when did you decide? So you were saying that you were kind of trying to figure out...
It took about 8 months. So at the time, I was married and my husband was in the military. In the US military, and he was stationed, this is my ex-husband, in Bahrain, and he really wanted to move to the UAE. So
UAE being United Arab
Emirates. So he was offered a position with the government, and he was like, you know, like we could really do this. And I was like, well, if this is something we're going to do, then I will close down my label, like, and I will go to the labs for a little while, and then we'll move. So that was kind of like one of the big deciding factors in it.
Basically, it's not like you were forced, but you kind of made the decision.
I made a decision, and it was like, otherwise I probably would have stayed in design for a lot longer.
And not meaning to ask for any values, but when you made the transition, did you have any emergency fund on your side? Because from the moment you left the label, you wouldn't have like a regular...
I got money from the label, like...
you were bought out?
I got, because we did a lot of private label stuff, so I got some money from that, and I also had money anyways, so I was okay.
Okay. Just trying to figure out, because when there are not a lot of people who just give up, or not say give up, but leave a dream to go chase another one. Or...
Yeah, I always knew that I could go back to design, right? So it wasn't like leaving a dream, because it was a viable business. It wasn't something... I worked in design for a long time. It wasn't something that was like being a singer or something that, you know, you have to hit the jackpot. I worked in the industry for a long time, and you get to a point where you do something or you don't do something, right? Going to the UAE was difficult in a way that I did not know about the legal structure of startups or anything like that. So I wanted to have a startup there, but you needed sort of either to be in a free zone or you needed to have a sponsor. There was all these different components that I didn't really know before I went. And, you know, I'd lived in the Middle East. I mean, I'd lived in the UAE before. So the culture and everything was fine.
But the legal part of business creation, probably.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have bankruptcy laws. I don't know if they've changed it right now. So if you take outside funding, there's no bankruptcy. You technically owe that money. Whether the people pursue it or not is a different option. But there's things like that you have to really take into
You don't have the
consideration.
LLC thing?
You have, if you're in a free zone, it's an FZE or something else, depending on what emirate you're in. And then if you want to have a mainland business, not a free zone business, you need a local sponsor who owns technically, I think it's 51% of the business. So there is a lot of things that you have to take into consideration, which I didn't think about before I went.
And was Shoppers created there, or did you have something before Shoppers came to be?
I went to work at a marketing company again because it made a lot of sense, and I worked at a wearable tech show in the UAE, so that was quite good because I got
Wearable tech, we're talking about Fitbit, Pebble, those kinds of things?
yeah, Fitbit.
Not necessarily one of those companies.
Earables as well. I think when people used to still use the word wearables. So I did that, and then I played around with Shoppers for a bit, but it wasn't really anything. It wasn't like a full-time gig, or it wasn't really anything.
You were moonlighting it.
Yeah, just like deciding how it could be, just like playing around with wireframes and so forth. Then I moved to Phoenix for a little bit, and then which I would say out everywhere in the world that I've lived, it was the worst place that I've lived. It's not a bad place. It's just a very closed place. It's there's a lot of tech there, actually. A lot of companies. ASU, I can't remember how many, but it's got a massive computer like science section or whatever. So a lot of large companies have second offices at least in Phoenix.
Is it a tax reason, or
It's cheaper, right? So it's cheaper. It's got a high standard of living. So a lot of companies that may have their main office in San Francisco or somewhere else may do marketing and sales in Phoenix, right? Or they might do something else. So for getting a job, it's super good. There are tons of jobs, and the growth. I think one of the cities in Phoenix is one of the fastest growing cities in the US in the job perspective. So, you know, for certain aspects of it, it's good. So, but when I first went, there's a guy called, is it like Marty Zilwig or something? And I went to Phoenix Startup Week, and I was like explaining what I want to do, and it's just like, yeah, just don't do this in Phoenix. Go to New York or LA, right? So from that point on, I just knew it wasn't like the right place.
it was quite clear?
It was quite clear, and you know, everywhere I've kind of lived, because I've lived in quite a few places, I've met people and made friends really easily, and I find it quite difficult there. I mean, downtown Phoenix is great. Like Phoenix as a whole, the hiking and everything else is an interesting city. But when it comes to like startups and entrepreneurship, if they don't have a heavy like marketing or sales or property background, they're just not understood very well. It's sort of like there's a lot of money there, and a lot of money you can get in investment, but you really need to be in like property tech or some kind of sales and marketing, and then they get it. Otherwise, it's just, they say it's like people here wouldn't have invested in Facebook or Snapchat, you know. It's kind of,
Really?
that's what they say, you know. Not everyone, but a few people.
Of course.
Then I came back to London, and then that was when like Shoppers was really a full-time thing.
That's when you moved. Sorry to interrupt you, but when you moved back to London, how was Shoppers at that time? Was it still something that you were moonlighting? Where I assumed you already had some wireframes of what you wanted to do,
it was
but
sort of like then it was sort of like getting a team together to actually make it possible. So my decision at the time was whether to go to New York or whether to go to London. Because I'm a US citizen as well, I could do either, right? So I guess London made sense to me because if you look at fast tech and retail tech, it really is the capital, from like Net-a-Porter to Farfetch to Lyft.
Portuguese founder.
Yeah, yes, I have met him. He's a very nice guy.
Yes, he is.
It just made a lot of sense to be in London. I know it very well. I think, because I said I went to Central St. Martin's at the University of the Arts London. has got a massive alumni community. So I've got a lot of contacts there, and my contacts in New York were very much in fashion, but more in design, right? Not so much with the retailers. So I kind of came back to London, and we've been working on like Shopist since.
Okay, for people at home who don't know what Shopist is specifically, you already gave us a few ideas, but let's assume that I have Shopist on my phone.
Okay.
What should I expect from the app? It's an app, of course.
Yeah, so because we launched in Berlin a couple of weeks ago as well.
Congratulations.
It's in German too, thank you. So we did localize part of it in German. You can find nearby retail. So you can find products, brands, and designers.
Mostly in the fashion textile industry.
All in fashion at the moment.
Okay.
We're focused on fashion right now. We might go into different verticals. We are planning to in the future, but we really want to go into more cities and verticals to begin with.
So the first market that you have now available, it's Berlin, because that's where you are right now.
In London.
Ah,
First
so
market's in London. And
because you were there.
Yeah. And then Berlin. So in Berlin, we've got about 42 shops on board.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. We haven't got all the stock from all the shops on board yet, but we will do by the time in the next like 2 weeks. We just have to make sure like everything looks good, the product sizes and so forth. And we've started with a curated selection of stores, like stores that we want to shop in, that we think have really cool products, but also are an amazing experience, right? We're all about the experience of shopping. So if you go into a store and the sales associate's amazing, or it looks nice, and it's something that you remember, you might want to Instagram, and you have great service that you can remember. Not somewhere where you go and you feel like it's transactional, and there's nothing great. So if it would be a restaurant, for example, it's somewhere you want to go again rather than just. And even if that was a hole in the wall, as long as it's something that's amazing and you can think about it and you want to recommend it to your friends.
Even in a hostel, something.
Pardon?
A hostel.
Yeah, even if it was a hostel,
But that's further down the line, I assume.
Yeah, as long as it's a great experience, right? So that's what we're really focused on, the experience. And we also have, as I mentioned before, lots of temporary retail, which is a very Ponzi way of saying sample sales and pop-ups, right? So in London, there's a ton going on all the time. They're super popular. We show them, and we also have like guides about fashion and shops.
Okay, so let's assume I open the app. It's on Android as well? Android and iOS.
It is, but our Android is not updated yet, so come back in a month.
Okay. No worries. When this episode airs, probably it's already everything updated.
Yeah, then go on to Android on the App Store.
So
On the Play Store even.
So let's assume I take out my phone and I say nearby where I can find a swimsuit.
Yep. A swimsuit, a brand, if you're looking for a brand. Or if you're like, into ethical or sustainable, you can
also research on that.
Yeah. And then you'll come up with the shops nearby that you can buy that product from.
And is it like a WeChat kind of thing where I can go to the shop and find that? Or just it's on stock, go there, and you might still be on stock when you get there?
You can reserve. We have a reserve now button. We have a try now, reserve now, and buy now. The buy now is sort of hidden because we really want to push people into physical shops.
What's the difference between what's the try now?
The try now just gives you the information of where to go right now to go into the shop. The reserve is...
I can go there tomorrow and it will still be there.
Yeah, and we also have like a WhatsApp like chat function where you can talk to the store owners.
Good.
Because a lot of the time there's like a trust issue. I'm telling you that there is a product, or Shopist is telling you there's a product in stock. You don't always believe what you read, right? So so you can like chat with the sales associate and they can tell you if it's in or not.
But that can go the other way around. I can say I reserve and never show up.
Yeah, but it's a timed reservation.
Okay.
It's like anything else. But it's like going an open table, right? You can reserve, you don't put any money down if you turn up at 8 p.m. or you don't turn up at 8 p.m.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's what you can do right now. For the shopper, it's good in the sense that they can see what's in the store.
Yeah, of course. I think that's a good value. I mean, you cannot see, but I'm not a big clothes shopper. I have 16 white t-shirts, 15 black t-shirts. I'm very, not the minimalistic thing, but I don't want to think about what I want to wear. But I think that for anyone else who likes to shop or who likes to have that experience,
You know, it's quite funny because I feel like when I talk to most guys, they always say what you just said. Like, not always, I can't give a definite, but I don't know if it's because it's fashion or something. I get this like qualifier and it's like, I'm not a fashion guy. I've just got this. And I go, fine. But the fact is you buy T-shirts, right?
of course.
So there's something that you want to buy. So instead of like going around the streets looking for it, you can find where the closest white or black T-shirt is.
Of course.
You know?
So to give you an idea, I mean, I have 2 black jeans,
Yeah.
both in the same store. I'm very, I will say that I'm very loyal to a specific brand.
Yeah, I think that's great. We love loyalty.
Besides the shoes that I have today, and it's because they were very cheap on Zalando outlets.
Yeah.
I'm always Nike. Jeans now, I'm Uniqlo. Shirt, I can go to T-shirt. I don't care. It's €1. It's white. It's good as long as it covers the body.
You know what will happen more, and you can see this even with H&M and different stores, and it is the trend. We are going more again into like slow fashion, you know, into things that aren't €1, things that we keep, things that are not so seasonal. I believe it's, God, I can't tell you the statistic, but because it's just gone out of my head. I can't tell you how many hundreds of millions of tons of clothes are thrown away each year into landfill, right?
Really?
Yeah, most of the clothes that we buy end up in landfill, especially when we're buying €1 T-shirts. There's no value to them. We don't perceive a value. We wear them, we throw them away.
Sure.
We don't usually even take them to clothes banks. The charity shops have got enough T-shirts. I mean, what resale value do they have to the shops, right? Then we have the problem of, no offense to Zalando, but companies like Zalando, which have very generous return policies, most of that stock does not get resold, right? It's the same in the UK and everywhere else in the world. You know, if you think about having a 60 or 100-day return policy, right now it's boiling hot. I buy, I don't know, a sundress. I return that in 100 days. It's winter, right? What's going to happen to that product? They don't want to keep it in a warehouse. If it doesn't get on sale, it ends up in landfill or it's incarcerated. No, it's not sent to prison.
Yeah.
It's incinerated.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem that people are really going to have to start to address.
But do you think they're already addressing that situation?
Yeah, if you look at a lot of the trends right now, H&M is going more into slow fashion. We're not as seasonal as we used to be, right? And this is affecting companies like H&M. It will start affecting companies like Zara in the sense that you say that right now you wear 2 pairs of jeans and different T-shirts.
Basically.
Right. So in probably the fall or the winter, you're just going to have more layers on.
Yeah, I always have a T-shirt.
Right. So we're not keeping to trends as much as times before. There's certain styles that you'll have that will take off a lot, but we're getting more and more about buying better product or direct to consumer product and buying things that we see have like worth to them again. And with that, you know, the fast fashion is having an issue.
Yeah, I think that at the same time, fast fashion has also been an issue. Or I've never heard of fast fashion until January, for example. Once again, because I don't pay attention to the industry, and probably that's my own ignorance. But I think that fast fashion recently has been taking a lot of heat because of the environmental issues, everything. Yeah. Once again, I'd never heard of that until January, and since then I've been hearing a lot about that specific.
You know, garments and the garment industry has a lot of issues, from manufacturing to labor to you know the price of them, that we kind of turn a blind eye because we like the sequin top, right? And during Berlin Fashion Week at the Ethical Sustainable Fashion Show, you could see like the huge rise of, it's not ethical anymore, it's like sustainable fashion. It's not like hippie t-shirts or like hemp clothes or whatever. It's more and it goes hand in hand, I would say, with the rise of like veganism. You know, it's like vegan leather or like, you know,
faux leather, faux bacon, faux.
Yeah, and there's like a whole thing in the UK right now about banning fur outright. You know, it's sort of we are becoming more conscious.
WeWork just banned meat.
Yeah, really, I did not know that.
It's I mean, you can eat meat inside, but you're not reimbursed when you have meat purchases on your lunch card or whatever it is, and you're not reimbursed when you plan events. You're not reimbursed for meat.
No, I think it's kind of sensible that I mean, I eat meat. You know, I do go through veganism every now and again, but I eat meat.
I eat meat every day. So.
And I also wear fur, which I shouldn't admit, but I kind of don't in London. I do in the States. In London, I'm always scared that somebody's going to pelt me. So, like, I've got a bright kind of jacket, and it's got 2 colors of fur, and everyone thinks it's faux. So I'm like, all right, I'll keep it like that. You know.
If you want, I can cut this out of the interview.
No,
if it
it's
gets
fine.
to British,
No, it's fine. I promise not to buy any more fur. I wouldn't buy it again, but I already have it, and I feel like because I already have it,
it would go to waste, and it would be a dishonor of whatever
Yeah.
animal came.
Yeah, I think like people are really more conscious. You know, I used to have a really bad habit of buying loads of shit. Like I would go and I had to stop myself to H&M and just buy the equivalent of 200 euros of a load of crap that I wouldn't wear and I would throw away, right? Because there's that rush of buying.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's a FOMO applied to clothes and fashion.
it really is, because you can buy a lot of stuff, and especially in the UK. Because I think somebody said to me, like, why does Zalando not work in the UK? And it's kind of like, because we're so fast fashion orientated. We go out. We like going out to wear, and we like to wear outfits. You know, you can see the Brits around here. We like dressing up, right? And we get rid of clothes on a seasonal basis. But yeah, that's like by the by. We don't have like that kind of mindset, but it is changing.
And you think that with Shopist as well, you can, once again, since you're adding value to the experience of buying, you're adding value, you're being able to research which are ethical brands or sustainable brands. Do you think that I won't say enforcing that situation, but giving an option to that, and once again, giving some power to the experience itself, do you think that Shopist can also help in that area? Because once again, you're not going to H&M and getting 500 t-shirts.
Yeah, I think
you're
it is.
taking the time to go to a store.
Because you know, I have friends over in the States who've got friends who've got like, you know, like really amazing denim stores and so forth, and people really research the products. I find that guys do it more than women a lot of the time. They'll research, you know, a special pair of jeans and like Japanese denim or whatever. They'll buy a product and they'll spend a lot of money on it and cherish it, right? Mm-hmm. And that product you'll see in a vintage shop maybe in 100 years to come, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas the shit that you buy from H&M, you're not going to see it anywhere in 100 years apart from in a landfill maybe. And that's not anything to do with H&M, it's just the quality and the price. Mm-hmm. We are going more towards that, consciously or subconsciously. We can see it with food, right? I think at one time there was a race to the bottom for fast food, and now people are like, yeah, they want more quality product. And it's the same with clothes, and even with designer clothes or whatever, people are going more into that vein. And with Shopist, we do want to promote that, but more so, we want to promote the amazing, like, makers around the world that don't have that kind of digital connection. Just saying, like, I think I mentioned in my pitch last week that we eventually want to be that digital connection for like leathersmiths in Marrakesh or wherever it may be. When I was in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and I would be looking for a certain type of product, right? I would want to know where I could buy like really amazing like Indian gold or something. And there was no easy way to find it. We want to kind of be the digital connection for those shops as well.
So you want to be almost have as a reliable Google Maps with in a very simplistic way. You want to have a chance for people to go there and at the same time have inspiration, but at the same time know what the hell's around us.
Yeah, just get out of the, you know, the clone zones of just all H&M, Zara, McDonald's, and all the brands that you see everywhere else in the world, right? To actually see that amazing shit that if you don't know it exists and you don't buy from it, it will die, and then you'll end up with just another chain store. And the great things that you can get all over the world that we kind of only see if somebody imports it, and be the connection for those types of stores all over the world, wherever you may be. So if you go to, I don't know, from Tokyo to anywhere, You can find the interesting things and not just go to the Uniqlo that's the same, more or less, than the one in London.
I kind of like Uniqlo. There's no Uniqlo in Lisbon or in Portugal, I think. And I kind of like the quality.
No, there's nothing wrong with it.
It's just the same.
I shop at all these stores too, but it's great to have the option.
Of course.
It's sort of like, you know, we can go to Alexanderplatz and everything's more or less a chain, right? It's nice to have the option of going to independent restaurants with like a cool concept. I feel that because fashion has got so used to having big brands that everything else is getting left behind. But a lot of the stores that we work with have huge brands inside. They will sell Adidas, they will sell Nike, so just sell interesting versions that you don't get on Zalando, or they will not sell to Zalando. And the way it's styled. And, you know, also, if you go into half of these stores, you kind of know whatever you buy, you're going to look good because they've got a really good eye, you know, and I like that as well.
Just have a couple more questions. I don't want to take a lot more of your
worries.
time. Thank you so much. How was your experience as a non-tech background founder? Because even though you had a design background and that can be at one point considered tech, what's been the experience of building an app or being the founder of a company that's mostly business around the app?
Well, I feel that I'm at an advantage being a non-technical founder. I also like a few things. Most of the founders that I meet are non-technical.
Really?
Yeah.
From tech companies?
Yeah. They will have a technical co-founder, but they won't be technical. The difference a lot of the time is, well, they might have done something, you know, somewhere along the lines. I mean, if you look at, say, the CEOs in this Techstars program, hardly any of them are technical.
I've only met a couple of them, so
Yeah. So if you go down the companies, most of them don't come from a technical background. They may have done something in a company that's technical, but they're not programmers or developers or anything else.
Or engineers or...
Yeah. The difference, I find that it's more pronounced if you're female and non-technical, because it's like 2 red flags, right? So that is my finding. Okay. So you're saying there's like 2 British companies. The other British guy is non-technical.
He is. When he told me, he sounded very technical when he tried to explain the company the first time.
Yeah, but the thing is, nobody's ever going to ask him, or they won't presume that he was not technical, right?
I didn't presume he was not technical.
But then you just assumed he was.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
And he explained everything in so much detail, and it's such a very specific area of the blockchain area, but without tokenization, everything, that when he talked, okay, you're an engineer, come, let's talk. But I put on the engineer glasses and engineer headphones just to try to figure out what he was saying.
Okay. And I find that as well, the assumption's always going to be, and I know this from actually technical female founders, that that is obviously not me, but technical female founders, they will get mansplained shit from people who probably couldn't even do a WordPress site, you know? So that's, and not everyone, but this is the experience. I think what else is quite tricky, and I know this from going to a female panel last night, if it's somebody asks you about being a female founder and you like talk about it, it's very difficult to walk the tightrope between being honest and people thinking that you're complaining, right? So it's sort of like, in female circles, you can talk about what it's like to be a female founder. To a wider audience, people just think you're bitching. So it's sort of like, if I start saying, you know, oh, well, there's 2 red flags being female and non-technical.
But that's true. I mean, every other thing, it's a red flag when you talk about investing, because any other thing that can be considered a disadvantage, it's a red flag. If I created a company today, and I'm not a native English speaker, they can say, I'm not a local, I'm not a native German speaker, I'm young, so a lot of things can be considered a red flag.
Yeah,
not as much probably as being a woman.
That's bullshit, though, because that's the kind of shit that you have to listen to when you say it. It's sort of like when people say, well, if you just work hard enough, you'll be fine. It's kind of crap. The fact is, you've got to get into the room to begin with, and you've got to get that leg up. So it's sort of like... my experience, I don't have a problem being a non-technical founder because practically all the technical people, practically all the founders are non-technical. I actually remember when I had my interviews to come here and I spoke to Jens Kapinski on the phone and I asked him about when he, you know, because I had I felt really self-conscious about being non-technical. And I think he said something like 80% of the people are non-technical founders that he's that come through or he's invested in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really surprised, but that put me on ease a lot. The difference is that people don't really assume or ask questions. They're always going to kind of assume they are technical.
So for someone, sorry to interrupt you. So for someone outside of this room, outside of our conversation, which has been very pleasant, and thank you very much.
No worries.
Someone who's non-technical and has that same mentality, that might work as a disadvantage. What would you have to say?
I don't think it's a disadvantage.
No, for someone who thinks it might be.
I would say it's not a disadvantage. One thing that is becoming more popular that I think wasn't popular before is having domain expertise, right? Actually knowing the market very well and knowing what you're trying to achieve, because things will change, but at least if you've got an end goal of where you want to be. I think because I'm not technical, I don't see limitations. I think when you are quite technical and you can say, oh, you got to build this, or you got to do this, you got to do that, I don't see it, because I'm just like, I just want this to work as maybe an end user or the retailer might want it to work. I don't see, problems with like code or the server or anything else. I don't really care. It either works or it doesn't work. So I think in that respect, it makes it a lot easier. I think if you have a completely technical team,
You might micromanage, maybe. I don't know.
you really, I was told that we have too much product in the product, and we're like, we've got a frigging app and a website. It's not, what the hell are we doing? You know what I mean? It's kind of, it's not too much product, right? And I know this is what I was saying about the competition. Coming from a fashion background, and my co-founders come from a retail background, as well, Joshua, who is our sales director, knows everything about retail. We went to St. Martin's together. We know the market inside out. So we've looked at competition, and they've come from it from a very much a problem solution basis. It's like, we know where there's a top nearby. You can find that top. It's very much just like product search. That's not how women particularly shop, right? So it's sort of not being so technical and just being solution orientated has actually helped us when we're working with the stores, because they like our mission, they like the way we look and feel, like that's the product, and they like what we stand for. So it's worked in our favor, not being too technical. Like, if we went in and were really technical about like the pros and the cons or how it works, they wouldn't give a shit. The buying into
of course.
an idea. So that's what I would say. But to anyone who is a non-technical founder, I would say there's a shitload of tech talent in the world. It's not particularly cheap or easy to find, but there is a lot. And there's a lot of technical people who want to do something in entrepreneurship or be a founder. They just don't have ideas. So if you've got a really good idea and a strong background, then go for it, because it's probably the cheapest time in history that you can actually build some kind of tech product on some platform with some sort of like MVP somehow, or prototype or whatever, and test it and see if it works. And if it fails, as long as it doesn't take too much time or money, who cares?
Okay, so thank you very much for this. I think, and I hope everyone listening right now, in terms of non-technical background, me included, I'm not a technical background. I always feel at a disadvantage, because I feel that if I could code, if I could do this, I could do that.
Yeah, but
But the thing you said, I could get someone with a technical background.
Yeah, but the amazing thing is, if you actually look, the amount of time, a couple of years we've been doing this, we've probably spent too much time on building a product, I would say. If I had to go back and do this again, I would probably get something built probably in 3 months that we spent 16 months doing, right? And just test it. And then just not worry that it's like in Swift or whatever language it is, and just show people and get the reaction. I think
and start iterating from there and seeing according to
And I think as well, one of my biggest problems being a non-technical founder, actually, and coming from a design and creative background, is I was always too much a perfectionist to show something that I didn't think was beautiful, right? And that's something that I think a lot of people have to get over, because who says, like, if you're not ashamed of your, like...
Reid Hoffman.
Yeah.
If you're not ashamed of the first product or the first launch, you've launched too late.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think that's really it. And coming from a design background, very much you don't want to send something out or sell a product that you don't think is beautiful. And
You have time to make it beautiful. You might not have a lot of
in
time.
fashion, it has to be, or people aren't going to buy it, right?
Yeah, of course.
In tech,
But doesn't have to be perfect.
no. What's the other quote? It's like, now I strive for excellence, not perfection. I'm full of quotes. I just say, just go for it. And the great thing is, like, if you're not failing, you're not learning. And I wish I gave myself the chance to fail a bit more earlier on and not be embarrassed, because I was like really painfully embarrassed if something didn't work, right? You know, like if it was a bit buggy, or to go to a shop and it didn't work, or you know, I wouldn't show my friends, I wouldn't do anything because it wasn't the perfect product. But for the budget and the time and the expertise we had, it was not going to look like Instagram or Farfetch or any of this shit. But I expected that on a shoestring. So it's like really manage expectations and be as happy as shit, because people around you will be really impressed that you've just done something and they will promote the hell out of it. But you've got to promote it first. If you're embarrassed and you're not like 100% this is amazing, then they're not going to buy into it, right?
Of course. One of the things that you said, and just finishing up before the lightning round, that will be the fastest part. One of the things that you said earlier in the conversation that it really resonated with me is that you not coming from a business background, from not necessarily the tech background, I think that this is actually something that you read and hear every day, is that you came with a completely fresh perspective. You didn't come with the MVP knowledge, you knew those things, but you were not massacred into existence of your brain.
You know, and I agree. And I think over this process, I got a bit like that. And I started knowing more, and I started getting a bit like petrified because I kind of knew more. I think when since being here, like Joshua joined like 2 months ago, and he came from like retail in London, and he came again as a fresh person in non-tech world with, hey, this is it, no, like I probably was 18 months ago, and it was good to see that again. You know, like
fresh
that
perspective, a fresh look at things, different set of eyes that are not tech.
Yeah, and then like, what I find when you really start emerging into tech is that you kind of get a load of excuses.
Oh.
It's kind of like why things don't work. Oh, well, it's just this, or it's just that, or just that. And at first you're like, bullshit, I'm not going to listen to that. But then because you hear them all the time, you're like, oh, it's just a server problem, or just this, or just that, or just the other. Which, I kind of say to our tech team, we work with mainly end users, being the shoppers, and independent retailers. They're not enterprise clients, right? They don't give a shit that we've got beta on the site. They don't know what beta means. It's kind of like they don't care. And if something doesn't work, they're just going to churn it. So and that's sort of what I think when I think of like tech, like the excuses that we come up with, or build times or whatever, anything else. And I kind of said this when it was during Berlin Fashion Week. Bizarre thing about tech is that people allow delays all the freaking time. Right. So during Berlin Fashion Week, we had a problem with one of the releases on the App Store. So I was talking to like 7 heads of the fashion councils, like from UK, actually, from British Fashion Council, from the Russian Fashion Council, and everything. I was showing them a part of the app, and a product which was 0.7 miles away, kilometers, sorry,
no worries,
was showing being 6,000 kilometers away. So obviously I had to bullshit about that and just be like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. But then I was talking to like tech guys, and they're like, oh yeah, they don't
care.
It happens. Oh, at least it works. And I'm like, the equivalent of that is sort of going to Berlin Fashion Week, even though it's a small one, with last season's collection, just to prove that you can make clothes, right? So it's kind of like, that's what tech's like. Sometimes just show a demo, we can do something. You're like, no, just...
You want the perfectionist kind of thing.
No, you just want to show the current thing. You just want to show what's current, right? What actually works. So I think that's the difference between tech and fashion. In fashion, you would show the collection you're supposed to show. In tech, you'll show the previous version and say, hey, at least we got a demo.
Okay. let's jump into the lightning round. Lightning round is really quickly. It's 4 questions,
Okay.
4 or 5 questions. You have 1 minute to answer. It's ta-ta-ta, really fast. Okay? Mm-hmm. So, what's the book that has impacted you the most?
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Feel the fear.
And do it anyway.
Who's it from?
I don't know. I've read it a few times. I think I read it first when I was like 21 or something, and I was freaking out when I was graduating.
Okay,
It's really good. It's like an old book, but it's really good.
Feel the fear and
do it anyway.
Do it anyway. That's a great title.
Yeah.
That out of itself, you might not even need to read it. You
just do it. Just live by it, man.
You're looking around. You read the title. Okay, that's it. Let's go. Okay, what's the tool you wouldn't be able to live without?
The tool?
Tool. Can be an app. It can be a phone. It can be a computer, even though those are very common answers. Just putting you on the spot. Please don't save two.
The tool that I couldn't use without would be my eyebrow makeup.
Okay.
But probably on a technical version, just G Suite. All the Gmail, friggin' calendar, all that crap. I couldn't live without it. I wouldn't know where I was going.
Tell me something you've changed your opinion in the last 6 months.
Oh, in the last 6 months, shit, that's a lot. I have changed my opinion in the last 6 months of myself.
You've changed your opinion of yourself.
Yeah.
Do you care to elaborate a little bit on that? If it goes too personal,
No. I think because like I'm going through a lot. I was going through a lot, you know, and like I was saying, I'm getting divorced and I've got a startup and all this shit. So obviously, I think I was freaking out, and I just didn't think I would still want to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think I just changed my opinion of myself and my capabilities, and I not taking myself too seriously and just like getting on with it.
Okay, very well. If you just finished college, you have, let's assume this, you have all your current knowledge.
Yeah.
But you just finished college.
Yeah.
You have all your current experience, but you just finished college.
Yeah.
You have $500 with you. What's the first thing you do?
What country would I be in?
You tell me.
All right, if I'm in London, I've got 500, I would say pounds.
Quid.
What would be the first thing that I would do? Right, well, we are in end of July, coming up to August in London, 500 quid. Oh God, that's a hard one. How long does this 500 quid have to last?
Wherever. You can go back to your parents' place and start learning other stuff. I don't care. I just want to know how your brain works.
If I had 500 quid and I was in London right now, I would probably get a food stand.
Food stand, really?
Yeah. We were talking about this yesterday. You know, we were talking about it, and you know, like the Mexican hangover cure, like red eyes. I'd just sell red eyes. And I was for 500 quid. I could probably make a lot of money if I get the businessmen in the morning.
Probably.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you.
It was really a great conversation. I really had a great time, and I hope you had a great time as well.
Good, thank
and
you.
I really learned a lot, and I hope everything goes well with Shopist. And if people want to reach you or reach Shopist, where can they find you?
Sara, SARA, at shopistapp.com.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much for being here on the Pioneers Show.
And thank you.
Thank you so much for plugging into this conversation. I truly hope you love this episode as much as I did. Me and Sara sure had a great talk, and I enjoyed every second of it. I must be honest, I had never thought of a fashion designer as an entrepreneur. Like I said, I always put them in this broader category of artist, but clearly the skill that's necessary is also much broader, like the one of a maker, innovator, entrepreneur, the people that we have here on the Pioneers Show. Any information that you might have missed will probably be linked up in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, consider subscribing to make sure that this podcast grows and we can get some more people to help everyone be the pioneers of their lives and careers. A big thank you to Sara Ahmadi and Thibaut Flundley, aka DJ Rodia, for the new music of the Pioneers Show. Once again, it was really a great pleasure having you over there. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.